Hello and welcome once again to Soul Sensations here on Soul Radio USA. Today I'm chatting with award-winning producer and songwriter Preston Glass. Hello, Preston.
Hey there, how are you?
I'm good, Preston. Hey, it's been a while since we last spoke. Is it about 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, time passes by pretty fast. It seems like yesterday, but that's because we both have been busy.
Yeah. So what we're going to do, for people who haven't heard of Preston, because I know there'll be a few listeners out there, because we hit new ones as well, I'm going to chat a bit about your early days and how it all came about, and then we'll move into what you're doing today. Okay. So, let's start from the beginning. What were your roots? Where were you born?
Well, I'm what a lot of people in America call an army brat. In other words, I'm the product of a family that grew up around army bases, and which means we traveled a lot, and we were exposed to a lot of different cultures early on. So I was born in a place called Fort Ord, California. You know, all the army bases were called Fort something. Yeah. And mine was Fort Ord, which was right near Monterey, California, Central California. And but immediately we migrated elsewhere to different places, New Orleans, which was a big upbringing, and different parts of the country, the East Coast, and then we settled back when my dad retired, back in California.
So what did you do for schooling? Did you go to different schools, or?
Yes, schooling was not a problem. In fact, I always say that growing up in that environment helped expose me not only to different cultures, different people, but different kinds of music. It wasn't just one type of music. It was everything that was hot at the time, you know, pop music, rock music, country music, of course soul music. And I think that helped me at an early age to not only get exposed to all that kind of stuff, but I started writing music that reflected what I was listening to on the radio.
Yeah. So when did you know you had a talent for songwriting?
This may sound a little backwards, but I was writing songs when I was 6 years old, and I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know I could write songs, let alone have a talent for it. But it was one of my older brothers that said, you know what you're doing? You're making up songs that never existed before. And I said, really? So it was the inspiration from people like James Brown, and all the way from that spectrum to Neil Diamond, who's on the other side of the spectrum. And, of course, the Beatles, who were a sensation at, in the early 60s when I was a kid. And the Motown sound, which was the sound of young America is what they called it. So age 6, age 7, age 9, age 10, I must have wrote about 300 songs at that point.
That's phenomenal. So, was any of your family music, or was it just you?
And in my family in music? Not professionally. My dad, as I mentioned, was in the Army, and he also had a trade of being a X-ray technician, which is a doctor. So on his spare time, he would come home and pull out his little guitar and play some blues, B.B. King and Jimmy Smith and all that stuff. And my mom, who was a housewife but also a part-time librarian, she liked the other kind of music. She liked more classical and liked more Nat King Cole. So I kind of got the sweetness and the melodies from her. And so she put on her records, and she also dabbled in playing the piano a little bit, so I got some musical knowledge from her as a kid.
So did you start, how can I put this? What made you take the road into the music industry? Did you have a job prior to music writing, or did you go, right, this is it, I'm going to go up there, I've got these songs, bang? And then,
well, because I started writing so early, and people started taking notice, I guess, when I was in my early teens, that I had a knack for it. Family members started directing some of my, what they called demos, to different publishers, and I had a very strong penchant for wanting to be a songwriter. I didn't really want to be an artist or a singer or a performer. I always took notice of the names in the parentheses. My dad taught me that when I was young. He said, you don't have to be the person down here in the big letters. You can be the person in the parentheses. And he said, by the way, they make most of the money. And I noticed that a lot of records, what they used to call records, that I liked had a lot of the same people in those parentheses, like Smokey Robinson, Holland Dozier Holland, and people like Carole King and Burt Bacharach and Neil Diamond. You know, a lot of the same names were in those parentheses, but on different artists' records. And I said, wow, they can do a lot of people's records and not have to just do one of their own records, you know. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And so at an early age, I wanted to be a songwriter. And then as a teenager, my older brothers and my parents started shopping my music around, so to speak. But it was when I was in my late teens, I started really loving the Philly sound, which, you know, was in the early 70s, mid-70s. And in particular, I loved Tom Bell's music, which was stylistics and Delphonics and spinners and that kind of stuff. I loved his arrangements and his melodies. So I never knew that by sending him a few demos I would catch his attention, but I did. And I found out that he was giving a seminar in Philadelphia at the time. And me being from California, that's 3,000 miles away, but I had some supportive people in school that threw a little fundraiser for me, and I flew all the way to Philadelphia as a 16-year-old, met Tom Bell, and you know, I had all but planned to move to Philadelphia because I wanted to work with him, and he said, finish high school. I said, I am going to finish high school. I'm going to finish in Philadelphia. Then he whispered in my ear, he said, well, don't tell anybody, but I'm not going to be here. I'm moving to the West Coast. People don't know it yet. He said, but I'm going to be out your way. So he said, just finish high school and wait till I come out there. So he moved. I thought he was going to move to L.A., but it was actually Seattle, Washington, which is also on the West Coast. And sure enough, when I finished high school, I moved up to the Bay Area. I mean, not the Bay Area, the Seattle, Washington area. And he signed me and my brother Alan Glass as a staff songwriter to him and Gamble Huff's Mighty Three Music.
Wow!
And I was just fresh out of high school, 19 years old.
So that would have been your first record label you signed with then, or was that did your first record label come later on? Did you start playing music from there and then? Right away.
As soon as Tom signed us as staff writers, which nowadays I don't think there are staff writers, but basically what it was anything that he was producing, we would get first crack at writing the songs on those projects. So immediately he was producing people like Denise Williams and Dee Dee Bridgewater, the Stylistics, the Temptations, Phyllis Hyman, and I had songs on every one of those albums. You know, I was just 19, 20 years old, 21 years old, and that was my first exposure to having songs released and recorded. And by watching Tom in the studio, it really gave me an education of what a producer is. I didn't really know what that word meant. I knew about songwriting, but once I started working under Tom Bell's wing, and by the way, there was a great bunch of songwriters there. Of course, Bell and James, who became artists in their own right and great songwriters. They were there in the office many times. There was a couple named George Merrill and Shannon Rubicam, who went on years later to write 2 #1 hits for Whitney Houston, How Will I Know and I Want to Dance with Somebody. They started as staff writers for Tom Bell. So, my brother Alan and I were part of that staff, and like I said, I learned a lot about arrangement, production, instrumentation from Tom, and when
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I was going to say, what moved me into production was I started working with, at the time, a budding producer named Narada Mike Walden. Narada was already known as an artist and a drummer, but he was starting to cut his teeth and making a name for himself as a producer with Stacey Lattisaw and Angela Bofield. And he kind of needed some other writers around him as well as collaborators to take the workload. So started writing a lot of stuff with Narada, and that's when the hits started coming. We had a project with Aretha Franklin, and we collaborated on many hits for her. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say, do you want to tell us more about your collaboration with Aretha Franklin? Because not a lot of people know about this. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about the tracks? Yeah.
We well, it was right after Luther Vandross worked with Aretha, and Clive Davis from Arista wanted a fresh new producer. So at that time, Narada had just worked with Arista on Angela Bofield. So Clive gave Narada a shot at working with Aretha. And that's when we were coming up with songs. Narada had an old song that he wrote for himself called Free Way of Love. And he kind of threw it away. He said, it's too pop. It's not really for me. And then I remembered that song when he was demoing it. And when it came time to find material for Aretha, I reminded him. I said, what about that song Free Way of Love? He kind of laughed it off, and he said, well, it's a little too pop for Aretha. I said, well, when Aretha puts her voice on something, she can sing the alphabet and make it soul soup, So sure enough, that's what happened. We demoed that out, and that was a song he wrote with Jeffrey Cohen. And then I wrote a song with Narada and Aretha called Who's Zoomin' Who. Yeah. So that album was, I guess, hailed as their big comeback, their platinum-selling album. And from there, that's when I guess Clive started noticing, well, who's this guy, Preston Glass, is working with Narada a lot. And he had this artist named Kenny G that was kicking around doing more jazz. And Narada didn't have time to produce him, so Clive gave me the offer to produce Kenny. And I remembered him from being in Seattle, Washington. Uh-huh. That's where Kenny's from, and I was up there working with Tom Bell. So I had first come across Kenny back then, early 80s, when he was with Jeff Lorber. So when I got the offer, I said, of course I'll do it. And, just hoping to sell maybe 100, so we can get a few thousand, that would be great. Well, the album took off and sold about 14 million.
It did.
And that's what kind of launched me into production. I mean, it was really the first album I produced as a solo producer. I co-produced a few things with Narada, but this was the first thing I had done on my own, and I got all kinds of offers. So that's what launched me into production.
So what do you prefer? Do you prefer the songwriting or do you prefer producing?
To be honest with you, although I love both, and both are very different kinds of things, I love songwriting. Songwriting is where my heart is, because it was, the first thing I ever did. And when I produce, although I don't mind producing other people's material, my favorite material to produce is my own. So, yeah. So it's a unique experience. Production is, it's like taking a song that's already done, whether it's my own or someone else's, that's painted. Maybe an outline is painted with just black and white, and then the production and arrangement is what brings the color to it. So it's like an artist paints a picture with whatever colors he wants, and that's a real creative process there.
Would you tell our listeners about your times with Earth, Wind & Fire and Natalie Cole?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Earth, Wind & Fire, that came about once my name started getting out there as I guess you could say I was a young whippersnapper. People were like, well, who's this guy? Who's this fresh guy that just produced Kenny G and made him, a household name? Yeah. Then that's when Maurice White, who was looking for a young producer with some fresh blood to infuse some of that into their already phenomenal production, and they were trying to make what is, I guess, now held as a comeback, because the band was had gone into different directions and was searching for contemporary sound. So basically, working with them was not only a good project for my career, but it was an education working under Maurice White and learning a lot about production from him, because he was a genius, really. And it taught me a lot about recording and engineering and how to stack stuff, and it was different working with a band. A lot of times because I play keyboards and guitar, I could play most of the instruments on the project myself. But when you got a great band like them cats, you don't want to do that. You want to use their sound and then just paint pictures around it.
So what about Natalie Cole?
Well, with Natalie, I didn't really. I wrote "Miss You Like Crazy" for her, which went to #1 here on the R&B charts. But I didn't produce that song. That was produced by Michael Masser, the late great Michael Masser. I had the good fortune of co-writing that with him and another legend, Jerry Goffin, who was Carole King's husband and who had wrote Natural Woman and a lot of other big hits, Locomotion. So we were the writers, and we actually originally, Michael Masser was going to give it to Whitney Houston.
Wow.
But Clive already had all the ballads for the second album, I believe it was, or maybe it's the third album. No, it's the second album. So Michael got offered to produce Natalie Cole, and that's how that song came about.
That was one of their major hits in this country as well. It's a brilliant track. But talking about hits, talking about the hits here in the UK. Now, I hope I've got this right. You wrote "We Don't Have to Take Your Clothes Off" by Jermaine Jackson, didn't you?
Jermaine Stewart, yeah.
Jermaine Stewart, yeah. How did where did the inspiration come for that? And was it penned for a film, or the film, or was it penned for some reason or other?
No, I'm going to tell you the truth.
Go on then.
You're probably familiar with an artist named Sheena Easton.
Yeah.
Well, that song, "We Don't Have to Take Our Clothes Off," was penned for her. I don't even know if she knows. But it was penned for her because her career, if you remember, started as very, very clean and very, My Baby Takes the Morning Train, those kind of songs.
Yeah.
And then she went into Sugar Walls with Prince, and she that brought a whole nother kind of audience there, a little bit nasty, so to speak.
Yeah.
So she was alienating some of her original fans, and she doesn't want to, alienate anybody. So she put the word out that she would love to have a clean song that had a provocative title. So I thought, that's kind of a challenge. So I thought of Clothes Off, but I said, we don't have to take our clothes off, which is actually clean.
Yeah.
And so I wrote that song for her, but the project never happened. It was supposed to happen. Right. Narda was supposed to produce her. So we had the track already sitting, and it was in a key for someone with a high voice, or a female voice. And so we were kind of, looking for someone to do that. And Jermaine Stewart came across the table, and he heard the song, and he loved it. And it just so happened he could sing it in that key. So there you go.
I never knew that.
Most people don't know that. Yeah. And in fact, he passed away. He never knew. I guess he always thought the song was written for him.
For him. No.
Yeah.
But I say that because we've seen East in that how we compose Bad, and then there was the Olivia Newton-John. She was the little country girl, singing songs like Sam. And then Grease came along, and all of a sudden, bang, then she brought out Let's Get Physical and stuff like that.
Right.
It's like, you're like going, wow, that's not the same girl. What we're going to do now, right, okay, Preston, is we're going to take a break for some music. And we're going to play some of your tracks that you wrote and that you produced. And we'll be back with you in about 15 minutes' time.
Great, thanks.
Okay, right. See you soon. Hello, and welcome back to part 2 of this exclusive and brilliant interview with Mr. Preston Glass. Welcome back, Preston.
All right, great to be here.
Now, apart from the music and producing, would you like to tell our listeners about your television and film contributions? Because there has been a couple of bits and bobs that you've done.
Well, a lot of times a song will be done for just an album project, and it turns out to be something that fits into a movie. We're working with Ronnie Spector, who was with the Ronettes, and there was a song called Tonight You're Mine, Baby, that we wrote for her because we were trying to make her have a comeback, and she loved the song, and she presented it to some contacts she had, and Paul Schaefer, who is with the David Letterman show, decided to produce the song that I wrote with Narda Michael Walden, and it ended up in a movie called Just One of the Guys, and that I think it was a top 10 hit there. I've had a few things in different movies that Quincy Jones has overseen, and but a lot of times those songs were just originally part of an artist project, and then they got thrown into the movie. Yeah.
So what was it like with Quincy Jones? What was it like working with Quincy?
Yeah, it was great. I'll never forget. He was working on a movie called Fast Forward that his good friend Sidney Poitier was directing. And Sidney was originally trying to write songs for the movie, and he's not a songwriter. He's one of the greatest actors, but he's not really a songwriter. So Quincy said, look, you can listen to the songs that other people write and suggest songs, but don't try and write the song. So I presented something with a co-writer of mine, Walter Afanasieff. The song was called Long As We Believe. It was just an instrumental at first, and Sidney Poitier heard the demo and said, who's that playing guitar? That's beautiful. So was always a compliment to me that the first black actor to win a Best Acting Oscar, Sidney Poitier, liked my guitar playing. I thought that was pretty cool. So we ended up giving the song the song started as a love theme to that movie, but they wanted a version with lyrics. So Saida Garrett, as one of her first songs that she ever wrote, she wrote the lyrics. Yeah, Saida Garrett, who went on to write Man in the Mirror and many, many hits. That was her introduction. So it was great working with Quincy. He always had a lot of talent around him.
How did you get involved with Anita Pointer of the Pointer Sisters? Because it was a solo album for what it is that correct?
Love for What It Is, yeah. Yeah. Of course, the Pointer Sisters were a big artist back in the 80s, 70s, and Anita, who sang a lot of the lead, was signed to RCA Records, and they were looking for a producer. And I was fresh off of writing hits for Aretha and Whitney Houston and Natalie and a lot of other female singers. So they tapped me to produce her solo album. It was a great, great album. They didn't promote it the way they should have. Anita was a great artist to work with. She sang her behind off, and it was something that brought us together as friends, and we're still friends today. We just saw Anita at an Aretha tribute. We just saw her and her sister Bonnie. They're doing fine, so it's been a lifelong friendship there.
One thing I need to know, because it's about songwriting and producing. Now, singers are tied to a record label. Are producers and songwriters tied to a record label, or can you use freelance, or do you have to actually basically stay with a record label and then go somewhere else?
Of course, these days everything is pretty much freelance, but there was a time when producers were, some producers, not all, there were some independent producers, but producers were tied to a label or assigned to a label. I'd never had to, I was always independent, but songwriters never were signed to a label. They were signed to a production company or a publishing company. But producers such as I guess I can even use the example of Lieber and Stoller. They did a lot of work for Atlantic Records, and they had a little label deal there, which includes ACO Records, with the coasters and things like that. Yeah. And then Gamble Huff, of course, they were with Atlantic for a little bit, and then Chess and then CBS, so they were kind of exclusive too. But these days, nobody really is, they got their own labels and they do their own thing.
Have you ever thought of making your own label?
Yeah, in fact, I do have a label. I have a little, it's a small little imprint, but we have artists. The label is Platinum Garage Recordings, and we go through soul music records for distribution. But it enables me to take artists and do whether it's singles or albums on them and have a place to, promote them and put them out, as well as some compilation albums as well.
Yeah, I was actually going to bring about the compilation albums. Just recently, I think it was, you brought out a compilation album on the great Ali Woodson. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yes, I had worked with Ali back in the early 2000s, 1999, 2001. And when I first started working with him, we started a friendship that lasted until he passed away until 2010. And his family, who I knew, including his wife, his widow, Juanita, they gave us the blessing to go ahead and release some of his great solo recordings. So we did this back in November. We put 14 songs all on, from time to time these songs appeared on other things, but never on one album.
One album.
And he has such a phenomenal voice that it's so great to listen to from start to finish, all Ollie Woodson. And it was a pleasure working with him, too. He was truly unsung. I mean, he was a singer. Of course, Aretha Franklin would invite him on stage a lot with her because I think she held him as one of her favorite singers.
Yeah.
So
did you ever get a chance to? Did you ever get a chance to write a track for Ali, or did you just have to? Did you do any music for him?
Oh yeah, most of the songs, not all, but most of the songs that he did that I produced on Ollie were my songs, like Drama in the Bedroom and Red Roses, fill in the blanks. He had a lot of songs that I wrote. I was fortunate to have him do that.
Now, a very good close friend of mine, and I do believe he's a very close friend of you and your family as well, Chubby Tavares.
Yes.
Yeah.
Chubby. He's like my brother from another mother, I call him.
Yeah. He's such a great chap. He's great. I love that guy to bits. Tell me about the collaboration you've had with him over the past year or so.
Well,
in fact, no, it's a few years actually. It's a couple of years.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad I have this little record label because this album got more exposure. But I actually produced 2 albums on Chubby. There was one that came out in 2012.
2012.
Yeah, it's called Can't Knock Me Down, and it has some great material on there. That's when I first started working with him and starting to see that we had a synergy there, and we both liked the same kind of music. And of course, I was always a fan of his when I was growing up. Yeah. I was a fan of the Tavares brothers, but his sound as a lead singer always was my favorite. So working, especially on this last album, which was called Amazing Ride, and we had a song that did pretty well called Smile, which was a remake of the classic song. He wanted to do that song because his mother used to sing that song to him when he was a little boy. Yeah. And I
play that all the time on the station. It's an absolute song.
Yes.
All the time. So I remember when, I think it was, I'd known Chubby prior to this, but I first got to speak to Chubby when he had the album, Don't Knock Me Down. And he told me the reason behind it, the whole lot, and it was heartfelt. It was absolutely brilliant, and the way that it was all put together, you know what I mean? I think that the album should be sort of pushed again and re-released along with the new album as well, because Chubby has a phenomenal voice, and you have great talent.
Thank you. Well, ironically, it's funny you say that because one of the songs on that Can't Knock Me Down album was called Yesterday Don't Count. And we're going to put that song on a new compilation called Love and Compassion Volume 2. It's coming out in late January. It's called Preston Glass Presents Love and Compassion. And that song from that first album is going to be on there because it fits the mode of the album, which is all message songs. Yeah.
Well, that moves us nicely on to what I was going to ask about next. Tell me about your own projects, your own albums, because I know you've sent me 2 of your albums so far, which I play. Tell our listeners that might not have known that you've had your own music.
Yeah, I do so much music that my artist albums, in one form or another, give me the opportunity to present talent, whether it's established, a legendary talent, or maybe a new talent, maybe a young artist that I feel has the ability. But I've released 2 volumes of a series called Dynamic Duets, which includes name people like Frida Payne Evelyn Champagne King and, you know, people like that. But also Brenda Lee Ager, yes.
Yeah.
But it also gives me the opportunity to present new artists that I'm working with, sprinkled in there to have the same kind of talent and keep that soul music thing going. So I have the Dynamic Duets volumes. Also, I have, as mentioned before, Love and Compassion, which are kind of like message albums, not unlike Marvin Gaye's or What's Going On kind of thing. We try and, you know, with the world having a lot of turmoil as it seems these days, we need something to show people that we have to have love and compassion for each other in one form or another. So that's what these albums kind of focus on. And Volume 2 is coming out in January, which will feature some people like Lamont Dozier, who is not only one of the greatest songwriters of all time, but a great artist, too. Lamont's on there, Larry Graham, who also a phenomenal artist, and it happens to be my brother-in-law.
All right, yeah.
And we're going to, Evelyn Champagne King will be on there with an offering. And then there'll be a lot of great new artists on, and new material, you know, brand new material.
Yeah,
so
I was actually going to tell you about, I was going to ask about Brandon Watts.
Brandon Watts. Yeah, this kid is like the real thing. I call him kid, but, you know, he's mature, but he's, you know, 30. But he might remind you of like a modern Sam Cooke or a modern Bobby Womack or something. I mean, he's got true soul. He's not only a great vocalist, but a great performer. He can produce. He can write. He actually helped me produce a couple things off of Chubby's last album, Chubby Tavares' last album. Brandon did. So Brandon's working on a new album for next year. He kind of flies his own way, so he produces himself, and he invites me to do a couple cuts here and there. But he's somebody I think should be right up there with the Justin Timberlakes and the, whoever's hot right now. He's got it.
He's the younger you. He is the younger you. You did the way you did.
Yeah.
So
he definitely got it.
So what lies in the future then? What have you got coming up? Tell me everything that's going to happen in the future.
Well, I can't tell you anything, everything that's going to happen in the future, but
I can just a little snippet.
Well, we got more of the same, with stuff coming out on our label. And we might even venture in taking a little trip to where you are in the UK and bring some of these artists like Brandon and bring some of the classic artists that we can come up with. Yeah.
I was actually dropping a sort of hint there because I did hear a whisper about something like that, but I know we can't say much about it and everything else, but we got a little bit out there. So, we moved swiftly on, so nobody heard that really, didn't know we could out. How can people get in touch with you and see how your career's gone, and how can they get your tracks, how can you get the music? Do you have a social media platform, or do you have a website?
Well, I'm on Facebook. You'll see me as my name, Preston Glass. I'm always with the hat on, so I got to have my hat. And I'm on Instagram, P Glass. But Soul Music Records, soulmusic.com has our label, which is Platinum Garage Recordings, and we try and release something every 6 weeks. So, as mentioned, we just released the Ali Woodson thing, and now we're going to do the Love and Compassion Volume 2 album, which is being compiled right now, and that should be out in January. And that music is always available through iTunes, Amazon, Spotify, and all your favorite digital music outlets. See, baby. Sometimes we have hard copies. So it'll be more of the same coming out soon. And like I said,
go
ahead.
I was going to say something there. We're talking about these musical downloads. Okay, so the pay for the downloads. How do you get your royalties from things like Spotify and things like that? Because I've chatted to loads of people, and because you're a producer, you probably get them most. But the singers seem to miss everything.
Yeah, those Spotify and Rhapsody and those YouTube, we see little bits of songwriting and publishing royalties on that. Other sites pick up the slack if you're an artist, like Sound Exchange. But the way to get the most mileage out of releases is doing your own websites or doing CD Baby and places like that. Our label has a good accounting system, but these days it's not like it was back in the day. But you have pros and cons. Back then you could make a lot of money as a writer and publisher, but these days you have more access to the world, the other side of the globe and everything. So it's a give and take, and I always try and see the positive. Yeah.
A quick question for you before we go. What do you think of today's music?
Well, believe it or not, I like a lot of today's music. When I say that, sometimes people go, "You do?" Well, but what I listen to might not be what I'm not talking about the music that may be, top 10 or top 40. I like some of these things that may not even be on the charts, but people are making great music. It just has to be exposed a little more, and you have to dig and find it. But it's out there. People are making good music. The stuff that gets the attention may not be the best stuff now.
The best stuff. So, but before we say goodbye, is there anything you'd like to add? You would like to thank somebody, or have you got anything that you'd like to say before we do?
Let's see. Well, shout out to my mentors who were Tom Bell and Gamble Huff. Also, Maurice White and his family. I know he passed away, but Narda Michael Walden, these were all mentors of mine. So shout out to them, as well as to David Nathan, who has the Soul Music Records platform that we go through. And a shout out to my wife, Gina, who's also my manager. She keeps the thing going.
I love Gina. I love Gina.
Yeah, so and a shout out to you guys, man, that bring the inside stories to folks. That's always interesting.
Well, Preston, it's been absolutely brilliant chatting with you. I'd like to take this time to wish you and your family a happy holiday. Have a great Christmas and a brilliant New Year.
Thank you.
And thanks for joining us, mate.
Thank you so much, Steve. Okay, bye-bye.